Hey there everyone, welcome back to the channel Chisom Codes, the channel where we simplify tech, coding and every single thing you need to know to break into the world of software development. Today's topic is one of the most powerful and important concepts in modern tech called APIs. So if you have ever wondered what exactly is an API, how do they actually work, why exactly are APIs such a big deal in software development? In this video, I'll be breaking down this concept for you in simpler terms. So stick around because by the end of this video, you will not just only understand API conceptually, but you will also see real-world example of how API works and how you can integrate that into your projects. So if that excites you, let's get started. So what exactly is an API? API stands for Application Programming Interface. Let's break it down into a simple real-life analogy. Imagine you walk into a restaurant. Firstly, you sit down in a table. Secondly, you see a menu. Thirdly, you place an order with the waiter. Fourthly, the waiter takes your order to the kitchen. Next, the kitchen prepares the food and gives it back to the waiter. And finally, the waiter delivers the food to your table. Now, let's translate that into technology and in the terms of API. You, the user, are like an app or a front end. The kitchen is like the server or the back end system. The waiter is like the API, the messenger between you and the system. So from this analogy, you necessarily do not need to know how the kitchen makes the food. You just have to tell the waiter what you want and the food appears on your table. That's exactly how API works. It allows two systems to talk to each other without knowing the internal mechanics. Now let's talk about how do APIs actually work. Let's get a little bit technical, but don't worry, I'll explain it in a beginner-friendly way. When you use an API, you usually make what's called a request. That request goes to a specific address on the web called an endpoint. That request can include, firstly, the data you actually want, the format you want it in, sometimes a special key or a token to identify who you actually are. API takes your request, process it on the back end, and then send back a response, usually in a format called JSON, which stands for JavaScript Object Notation. Now, let us understand where exactly are API used in real life. And I know you might be wondering, do I actually use API in my real life? And the answer definitely is yes. Let me give you 5 real-world examples. Firstly, Google logins. When you click sign in with Google, the website uses the Google Authentication API to authenticate and know who you actually are. This actually helps to prevent malicious attack or from allowing third-party individuals to access your account. Secondly, maps. Apps like Uber or Airbnb uses Google Map API to show location and direction. Thirdly, weather apps. They don't generate weather data, rather they generate it from a weather API. E-commerce. Stripe and PayPal provide APIs to handle secure transactions. And last but not the least, social media. Ever want to post on Instagram from a different app? That basically is social media APIs in action. Now you can see that APIs are the backbone of mobile applications and web developments. Alright, now that we have talked about real-world example of how APIs are being used, let's dive more into the different types of APIs you may have heard of. Firstly, REST API. REST API is one of the most commonly used API in today's mobile development. It uses simple URLs and HTTP method like GET, POST, PUT, and DELETE. Secondly, SOAP APIs. This particular type of API is an older version of API which was used in the early stage of mobile development and web application. It uses a very strict format called the XML and is mostly used in enterprise applications. Thirdly, GraphQL APIs. This is a newer and a more flexible versions of API that have been introduced in today's trend of mobile APIs. It can help you carry out basic tasks that every API can do in simpler terms. This is an API that sends automatic updates when something changes in the system. For example, like when Stripe or PayPal sends you a notification when a payment is successful or declined. And just so you know, API comes in 3-level form of level access. Firstly, public API, which is open to everyone and in a simpler term is more of an open source. A typical example is the Twitter we actually use today, currently known as X. Secondly are private APIs, which are used by most companies to maintain security and privacy. And last but not the least, partner APIs, which is shared between organizations or business partners with permissions. Now let's talk about some of the best practices when using APIs. When using API, keep these best practices in mind. Firstly, keep your API keys secret. You should never in any situation hard code them in public code. Secondly, read the documentation. Each type of API has its documentation and which serves as a guide for you to utilize it in the best possible way to get the best out of it. The more you study the documentation, the more you have a very good understanding of how it works and how to implement it in your workflow. Thirdly, respect the rate limits. If an API says 100 requests per minute, do not exceed it. One of the best practices of using API is sticking to the terms and the rules that governs such APIs. This way, you actually get the best out of it without stepping in different boundaries. Handle errors gracefully. Sometimes the API can be down or return unexpected data. In this situation, you are expected to handle it in a secured way rather than tampering with the terms and conditions. And last but not the least, secure your requests. This is very important, especially for sensitive data like payment and authentication. You want to make sure that each request that the API sends or receives is secured and protected. And there you have it. Now you understand what APIs are, how they work, where they are actually used, and how you can start using them too. And if this video helped you, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you won't miss any of my upcoming videos. Leave a comment if you want a full tutorial on building your own API or connecting APIs into your project or a Python project, and I'll be definitely glad to do that. And until next time, keep learning and keep building. Always remember that you are smarter than what you think, and I'll see you all in the next video. This is Chisom's Code. Let's code, grow, and conquer together.